The cold doesn't knock, it invades. A medieval winter, ruthless, no mercy, no warmth. The kind of cold that bites through wool, skin, straight to bone. The wind claws at crooked wooden walls, screeching like something alive. Snow piles, higher, heavier. The air slices into your lungs. 20 degrees Fahrenheit, about -6 Celsius, maybe worse. Look around. This is home. 4 planks nailed together by hope and desperation. Gaps wide enough for the wind and other things to crawl right in. No fireplace, no mattress, no comfort, just dirt floors, frozen breath, and a question burning in your mind. How did anyone survive this? The truth. They slept wherever survival allowed. Places that today would barely qualify as shelters. Some huddled in barns, buried in straw, others curled against livestock, sharing warmth with something that had 4 legs and a tail. Some dug straight into the earth, living like animals below the frost line, and others found the one place heat always rises, even if it meant sharing that space with things that scurry and squeak. Each place more desperate, more shocking. The first place wasn't meant for humans, but when death came knocking, they crawled inside anyway. If you think a pile of hay sounds cozy, you've clearly never met the medieval version. Sure, hay was soft, kinda. Warm? Sometimes. But clean? Oh no, not even close. The moment you laid down, the real guests made themselves known. Tiny claws, little feet, whiskers twitching in the dark. A sound like soft paper tearing, but it wasn't paper. It was rats, scurrying, crawling, digging into the straw, and sometimes over you. And the smell, a cocktail of wet hay, old sweat, cow urine, and something much, much worse. A smell that never left your skin or your memory. But in medieval survival, comfort wasn't part of the deal. You weren't looking for peace. You were looking for insulation. Anything that could trap just a little heat, long enough to stay alive. That's where the hay came in. Straw worked like primitive insulation, rough against the skin, sharp sometimes, itchy always, but better than the frozen dirt floor. It was the kind of trade-off that only desperation could justify, and make no mistake. The rats knew it too. If it was warm enough for you, it was warm enough for them, nestled deep in the same straw, right there, under your shoulder, behind your neck, or worse, moving across your legs as you tried, somehow, to fall asleep. You breathe in, dust fills your lungs, you scratch at a flea bite that wasn't there an hour ago, and you try not to think about what just brushed against your foot, because medieval winter didn't care if you were scared of rats. It cared if you could survive the night. By the way, drop it in the comments. Would you actually do it? Crawl into a pile of hay, knowing it's full of rats? Or would you demand a medieval refund and freeze with dignity instead? But if you think straw and rats were bad, imagine trading that for something bigger, warmer, and very much alive. If the barn full of rats didn't break you, this was the next logical step. Sleeping with cows, not beside them, not near them, with them, pressed against warm, heavy bodies, covered in rough fur, wrapped in the humid breath of something with horns, and absolutely no sense of personal space, because when the cold hit, brutal, unforgiving, 30 degrees Fahrenheit, about -1 Celsius, sometimes, even lower, there was no luxury of pride. You did what you had to do, and that meant becoming part of the herd. The air inside the stable was thick, heavy, warm, yes, but suffocating. A choking mix of wet hay, sour manure, damp animal skin, and the unmistakable scent of something alive and steaming. The walls sweated. The animals sweated. You sweated. Together, and forget about silence. Hooves scraped against dirt. Cows grunted. Sheep shifted. A sudden snort beside your ear. So loud, so close. It sent your heart jumping into your throat. Every sound was a reminder. You were just one more animal tonight, fighting the cold, fighting the dark, fighting the wind that still found its way through cracks in the wood. You lay there, curled into a ball, your back pressed against the flank of a cow the size of a small car, her ribs rising, falling, and you pray she doesn't roll over in her sleep, because if she does, well, there's a reason. No one ever wrote songs about the romance of medieval winter. And still, this was considered a good night, a lucky one, because if the barn was full, if the stable had no room, there was somewhere else. A place colder, harder, and much, much worse. Welcome to the luxury suite. Medieval edition. Picture this: a dirt floor, cold as stone, walls so thin, the wind slices straight through. And your fireplace? If you were lucky, a pile of glowing embers the size of a shoebox. If you weren't, just cold ash, smoke, and the fading memory of warmth. The smell inside? A mix of damp earth, sour smoke, mildew, and something sharper, something alive. The scent of desperation. Soaked deep into the walls, you try to lay down, but the ground? It's not soft. It's frozen mud, packed hard, rough, sharp against your back, your hips, your knees. You wrap yourself in the only thing you've got, a scrap of wool. Thin, scratchy, useless, and just as your body starts to surrender, not to comfort, but to sheer exhaustion, you feel it. Tiny feet, scratching, skittering, right across your face. A rat, treating your head like a shortcut. You flinch. Too late. Gone. Back into the shadows. Or maybe into the straw pile, by the wall, where the rest of the family is waiting. You breathe in. Dust, smoke, and the bitter taste of cold air fill your lungs. Your throat burns. Your chest feels heavy. And still, this dirt floor, this icy box, with no heat, no light, no safety, was considered indoors, a luxury. If you even had one. And if this level of discomfort already has your skin crawling, go ahead, hit like, smash subscribe. Because medieval winter survival, we are just getting started. Because when even this failed, when the fire went cold, when the wind got too cruel, and the rats too bold, survival forced people into something far more personal. Would you rather face the cold, or share your only heat, pressed skin to skin, with everyone you live with? It wasn't called a bed, not really. It was survival, disguised as furniture. A rough wooden plank, a thin layer of straw, half mold, half dust. And into that space, you crammed, not alone, never alone. 2, 4, sometimes 8 bodies, twisted together like a pile of tangled laundry, except every piece was cold, tired, and breathing. There was no such thing as personal space. Elbows pressed against jaws, knees jammed into ribs, someone's foot shoved somewhere it absolutely didn't belong. You didn't complain. You couldn't. Complaining meant opening your mouth, and opening your mouth meant losing precious heat. And the smell, thick, humid, a heavy stew of sweat, damp wool, wet hair, and something deeper, something older. The scent of people fighting winter with nothing but flesh and stubbornness. Someone shifts. The straw cracks. A sharp piece jabs your shoulder. You wince, but you don't move. Moving means letting go of the tiny patch of warmth you've managed to claim. Someone else coughs. Someone snores. A whisper, a groan, a fart. Nobody reacts. There's no shame left. Dignity froze to death 2 nights ago. And yet, this was the good option. A spot on the plank, inside, with other bodies. Sharing warmth, because the alternative was outside, and outside didn't forgive. But even this wasn't always enough. Sometimes there was no bed, no plank, no straw, just open space on the dirt floor, or worse, the cold, merciless wind. When even the warmth of others wasn't enough, there was only one thing left: wrap yourself in death, to cheat it. How far would you go to keep your body warm when the fire is gone and the cold is winning? No bed, no floor space, no fire, nothing. When every other option vanished, when the barn was full, the stable packed, and even the communal bed had no room left. There was only one thing left to do: wrap yourself in death to avoid it. Animal hides, rough, heavy, cracked from age, greasy from years of use, still carrying the faint, bitter smell of the creature it once belonged to. Wet leather against your skin, cold at first, slick, but slowly, painfully. It traps what little heat your body can make. You roll yourself tight as your frozen fingers will allow. Arms pinned to your sides, legs pulled in, chin tucked down, a medieval burrito. stuffed with fear, seasoned with smoke, and wrapped in the faint stink of old blood and wet fur. It's dark in here, almost silent, except for your breathing, shallow, fast. The pounding of your own heart feels louder than the wind outside. Every exhale hangs in the air, a tiny ghost of warmth that disappears before it reaches your nose. The ground underneath? Still frozen, still unforgiving. Hard lumps press into your hips, your ribs, your spine, but you don't dare move. Movement means opening, and opening means losing heat. You listen. Out there, the wind screams, the rafters groan. Something scurries nearby. A rat, or maybe something bigger, something hungrier. And you wonder, how long before the cold slips past the hides, past the wool, past the skin, and reaches the bone? Because tonight, this is it, your final line of defense. You, wrapped in someone else's skin, hoping, praying, that nature doesn't win. No roof, no walls, just open sky, and the cold staring down at you. So, you do the unthinkable. You dig. What do you do when there's no roof, no walls, nothing but open air and frozen earth? When the cold no longer just hurt, but hunted, people did something desperate, something primal. They disappeared, underground, not into basements, not into bunkers. Those didn't exist. They dug with bare hands into the frozen earth, clawing at dirt, mud, roots, until a hollow appeared, just big enough for a body, maybe two. The walls, raw, wet, cold. You could smell it, that sharp, damp scent of soil, mixed with the bitter musk of rot, and something else, something alive. Because where there's warmth, there's always something waiting to share it. Tiny claws, scraping, digging, rats. Of course, rats. The same creatures trying to survive the same nightmare. Their beady little eyes, reflecting back what little light made it inside. You crawl, in, shoulders scrape against dirt. Roots pull at your hair, loose soil falls, lands on your face, your mouth. You spit, you gag, but you don't stop. You can't, because outside, the wind has teeth. 30 degrees Fahrenheit, -1 Celsius, or worse. The kind of cold that doesn't just freeze, it shatters. Inside, the air is thick, heavy, damp. You can taste it. Earth, sweat, breath. The ceiling droops inches above your face. The floor, slick, uneven. Your clothes soak through in minutes. It's dark, not lights out, dark. It's cave, dark, grave, dark. No sound, except the slow drip, drip of water from the walls. And the scratching, always, the scratching. You curl tighter, pray the dirt holds, pray it doesn't collapse, burying you alive before the cold can finish the job. But this hole in the ground, it was safer than the storm above, at least for a little while. But not everyone was ready to live like a mole. Some chose a different kind of risk. If you won't go down, then the only way left is up. When the ground was too cold, and the earth too cruel, there was only one place left to run, up into the attic. Because if heat rises, maybe, just maybe, you could ride it out, tucked between crooked beams, broken rafters, and piles of dusty hay. Hay so old it smelled more like mold than grass. You climb, slowly, carefully. One bad step, and the rotten wood might crack. Or worse, give out completely, dropping you straight through the floor. Up here it's different. No manure this time. No cows, no mud. But don't breathe too deep, because the air is thick, damp, sweet, in the worst possible way. A stew of wet wood, mouse droppings, and mildew so strong you can taste it. And you're not alone, never alone. The rats already knew about this place. You hear them first. A scratch, a thump, a squeak, too close. Somewhere in the dark, behind a bale of hay, a pair of tiny eyes watches you, and then disappears. You wedge yourself into the smallest corner you can find. Hay scratching at your neck, splinters stabbing your back, dust filling your nose, until every breath feels like inhaling powdered dirt. The wind groans, the roof shifts. A beam above your head creaks, loud, too loud. Is it settling or about to give? Either way, you freeze. Not from cold this time, but from the creeping fear that everything could collapse. Still, this attic, this brittle skeleton of wood and hope, it was better than outside, better than frostbite, better than the wind. If your bed suddenly feels like the throne of kings, hit like, subscribe, join the brotherhood, because the next chapter gets darker. And as you lie there, listening to the storm claw at the roof, you realize, because some nights, it wasn't the cold, but the sounds in the dark that made you wonder if you'd live to see morning, the sounds of death creeping outside. Silence wasn't silent. Not here, not tonight. You lie there, curled in a dirt hole, or crammed beneath sagging rafters, barely breathing, listening. Because out there, something moves. The wind shrieks, high, sharp. It squeezes through cracks, rattles broken shutters, slams against the roof like a beast trying to get. And then, silence, for just a second, and then, crack, a tree limb snapping in the distance. Or maybe something heavier. Footsteps? No, too slow for a man, too heavy for a rat. A shape out there, dragging, crunching over frozen ground. Could be the wind, could be wolves, could be worse. You'll never know until it's too close. Every creak of wood above your head feels like a warning. Is it settling or giving up? You stare at the ceiling, waiting for it to fall, waiting for the cold or the roof or something with teeth to finish what the winter started. Your breath clouds the air. You try not to inhale too deep because the cold bites. The air feels thinner, heavier, and the pounding in your chest, louder than the storm. You strain to hear anything, any clue. But the dark plays tricks. A branch scraping the wall sounds like claws. Wind shoving the door sounds like hands, or paws, or something with both. And here's the brutal truth. You didn't sleep. Not really. Not on nights like this. You just waited, eyes half closed, muscles tight, listening, because death had a sound. And tonight, it was close. But somehow, some way, they laughed. Not because it was funny, but because if you didn't, the fear would eat you alive before the cold ever had the chance. And that is where things get truly strange. Somehow, they laughed. In the middle of the cold, the rats, the filth, the fear. They found something absurd, dark, ridiculous. Enough to smile. Because when survival gets this bad, you either laugh or break. Jokes floated through the dark, half whispered, half gritted through chattering teeth. Squeeze closer to the rat. He's warmer than your husband. Or, careful where you sleep. Last winter, the cow rolled over, and we lost. Uncle Thomas. Or the classic, who snores louder, the cow or your mother-in-law? And nobody got offended. Not anymore. Dignity froze to death sometime around the first snowfall. Laughter wasn't a luxury here. It wasn't even a choice. It was survival. A thin shield against a world so cruel, so stupidly unfair, that sometimes the only thing left was to mock it right back. You could either cry or chuckle at the fact that your bed was a pile of moldy straw shared with 3 people, 2 rats, and a goat that absolutely refused to shut up. The fire's gone. The walls are shaking. The wind's howling. But for one brief moment, the sound of a bad joke cuts through it all. And somehow, that's enough to make it through one more night. Because when you've got nothing else, no warmth, no food, no future, a little bit of dark humor might be the only thing standing between you and the madness. Looking back, it feels impossible. How did anyone survive? The worst sleepover in human history. Let's take one last look at the worst sleepover in human history. Your options? Oh, they were something special. A pile of straw, infested with rats. A stable, curled up with cows, sheep, and the overwhelming perfume of manure. A dirt floor, cold, unforgiving, and occasionally doubling as a racetrack for rodents. Then, the communal bed. A wooden plank stuffed with elbows, knees, and regret. No personal space, no dignity, no mercy. And when that failed, the human burrito, wrapped in animal hides, damp, heavy, still clinging to the smell of something that used to breathe. If that wasn't enough, you could always go underground, dig a hole, crawl in, pray the dirt holds, surrounded by mud, roots, and the constant sound of something scratching or climb, up into the attic, wedged between rotting beams, moldy hay, and rats that absolutely did not pay rent. And that was it. Welcome to medieval survival, a time when the only real 5-star review was still being alive when the sun came up. No pillow, no blanket, no room service, just breath, body heat, and the stubborn refusal to freeze. And yet, somehow, they did it, night after night, year after brutal year. But there's one final truth, one last thing they understood, that maybe, just maybe, we've forgotten, and it changes everything. They didn't survive because they were stronger, or smarter, or luckier. They survived because there was no other choice. There was no plan B, no backup, no waiting for rescue. It was you, your hands, your fire, your will, or nothing. An entire generation, forged in frost, tempered in hunger, shaped by nights spent tangled in mud, hay, fur, and fear. Their strength didn't come from comfort, or convenience, or safety. It came from something older, wilder, raw, the brutal, stubborn truth that survival isn't a lifestyle, it's the refusal to disappear. And maybe, just maybe, that's what we've forgotten. That warmth isn't just a blanket, that food isn't just what's in the fridge, and that being alive was always the greatest luxury of all. If you're ready to carry the torch of ancient survival, subscribe now. This brotherhood needs every prepared soul. Tell me, which of these brutal techniques would save you or break you? Drop it in the comments. Hit like to fuel this fire before the cold claims what we forget. Pass this knowledge on. Share it. Someone out there might need it sooner than they think. Don't stop now. The next video holds a skill that could change everything.